as a group as a whole, if they were ducks, they'd drown.
Yeah.
Well, let's call them Hibernianisms, I'd say. But
Okay.
too much
Sorry.
drinking 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
It's
No,
always drink.
Oh, it's kind of stayed with me. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I might get voted off the island for this one because I know everybody wants to get on to Wandering Rocks and leave Scylla and Charbydis behind. But could we take a couple minutes and look at just the very, very ending of Scylla and Charbydis? Because I like to know what other people think. It leaves me a little confused. I mean, there's that quotation from Cymbeline, where there's a bridge being made between the Britons and the Romans, so maybe a bridge between Scylla and Charybdis, but I'm just not sure how to take the ending, and I wondered if some people have some views on that.
The ending.
Okay.
Could I just say, Dave, that this was mentioned last night at our Ulysses class?
Okay, right.
The director of the center referred to it as Scylla and Chlamydia.
Okay, right. Right.
That doesn't add to the greater knowledge, but I said
No, that's great.
And we will assume that was a joke and not a mistake on the director's part.
absolutely.
David, if anyone's anything better to say than this, but my understanding of it has been that it's a sort of a peace, as you say, between the Romans and the natives of Britain. Well, the ascendancy who run the library would be the Romans,
Right.
the empire, and then the let's say the what would we call them, the Irish writers movement would be the equivalent of the Celtic British, and it's sort of a wish for peace within the library type of thing, inside Stephen's mind.
Right, right.
That's my understanding. And now, generally when people ask that question, there's an ominous silence everywhere. No one,
Okay.
no one really knows.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Well, we know that Stephen looked at was interested in augury, the augury of birds, the flight of birds and things, of foretelling things. And he's just come out of the library, and he also talks about the Holocaust in a way, the burning of flesh and the smoke rising from the altars being also a method of divining the future, or of at least telling omens whether things are going to be okay or not so okay. So he's come out in the paragraph before there, kind air defined the coins of houses in Cadell Street, no birds. Frail from the housetops, 2 plumes of smoke ascended, pluming, and in a flaw of softness softly were blown. Then he's talking to himself. I mean, this is what he sees, and then he says, cease to strive. Peace of the Druid priests of Cymbeline, hierophantic, which means that they worshipped in open air, from white earth and altar. So it was an outdoor altar. And then he quotes from the play Cymbeline, laud we the gods, and let our crooked smokes climb to their nostrils from our blessed altars. So Stephen, I don't know that I'm not sure that it has any really deep meaning. This is just, Stephen is very prone to these kinds of associations, one thing with another. So, he remembers, he's been talking about Shakespeare all morning, and so he remembers Cymbeline.
If I could add to that, Cymbeline is an example of one of Shakespeare's last plays on the theme of reconciliation. And he has that quote about, where there's a reconciliation, there has to have been a sundering. So that may be another dimension to his reference to Cymbeline at the end of this chapter.
Yes, that's right. That's a good point. Susan, correct? That's a good point. Pericles, Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. Yes. Thank you for that. That's good too.
It's
And
a-
Bill, thank
it's-
you, and Joe as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad since Shakespeare has been brought up so directly here, I should mention that I am beginning a new plunge into Shakespeare, and I am very much a novice, and I really do like reading in groups. And so if any of you hear of or want to form a Shakespeare reading group, please let me know.
Count me in.
Yeah,
You're
I would join.
Yep,
Yeah,
And I'm fine.
sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, there you go.
okay, there we go.
And
All
I'm
right.
in the Shakespeare Society, which has been doing Shakespeare for 120 years. So they take the plays in turn. And we're doing Taming of the Shrew this spring.
Okay.
I'm the president of the Cleveland branch of the English speaking union, and we just had our annual Shakespeare competition. We sponsor Shakespeare competitions in the high schools and send our winner to New York. I'll be going to New York in April to the national competition. Branches from all around the country, Hawaii, West Coast, everywhere come to New York to compete at Lincoln Center. And the winner, a high school student, gets 3 weeks in England at the British American Academy of Dramatic Arts to study Shakespeare. So,
Oh, wow.
Lovely.
Okay.
so Shakespeare's a big part of what I do, and I love to read them too. So yeah, count me in.
Okay. Well, like I say, I'm willing to either join or set up. Either way is fine with me. But it's definitely something I would like to begin fairly soon. So,
What would
Okay.
do I have? Let's talk about it. Will we do all comedies and then tragedies and then histories, or do them in the order they're thought to have been written, or the order that they have thought to have been performed? Or I mean, there's so many ways to approach
well,
it.
the way that I would probably be most
Alphabetically?
interested in doing it is to start with the plays in order of how often they appear in James Joyce works.
Okay.
Very good.
You know,
Well, that's Hamlet.
That's
Hamlet.
a good
Macbeth.
test.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Bill. No mystery about the play we'll be starting with, is there?
okay.
Okay.
And if we want to associate it that way, do we want to, let's say we were going to do after Milkwood? No, actually, to do after Milkwood and then to do
Under
one or
Milkwood?
other- under Milkwood.
Whose
I'm
idea was
really
that?
good.
That's a great idea, actually. It's a great
Yeah.
play.
That's for next Monday.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
it starts next Monday.
All right.
And
Yeah.
we've lined up my
You guys-
brother's keeper after that.
You guys finished reading The Dead and I missed it?
Yes.
Oh, we read that in January.
Oh, okay.
Or did we read it we read in December or January? That's how that happened. Was we read The Dead in the typical time period. I
Mhm.
think we read it in late December.
Yeah,
That's right.
So then when we went to Dubliners, we thought, well, it's a little early to repeat The Dead.
oh, okay.
So that's
I was looking forward to reading The Dead next week. But anyway, Under Milkwood's great.
And I do want to point out, Duncan, that after some trials, you were solid on the botany of that title. It was Milkwood, not Milkweed. Even though you were having problems with the preposition, you got the botany right. So big thumbs
You know,
up.
I've had a lot of troubles. You know, I always remember when I was in high school and we were studying Wordsworth, and I took one of his most famous poems, at least in high schools, and I changed the title to Intimations of Immorality, much to the delight of my English teacher.
Pieces of immorality.
You were doing it in the pubic interest.
That's right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think I was an unconscious messer since early age. Okay. Well, we're going to begin Wandering Rocks, and there will be a link if any people watching this on YouTube are interested in reading along as well as hearing us read it. And with that, I will begin. The Superior. The Very Reverend John Comrie, S.J., reset his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he came down the presbytery steps. 5 to 3. Nice time to walk to Artane. What was that boy's name again? Dignum, yes. Vere dignum et justum est. Brother Swan was the person to see. Mr. Cunningham's letter? Yes. Oblige him, if possible. Good practical Catholic. Useful at mission time. A one-legged sailor, swinging himself onward by lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked short before the convent of the Sisters of Charity and held out a peaked cap for alms towards the Very Reverend John Comrie, S.J. Father Comrie blessed him in the sun, for his purse held, he knew, 1 silver crown. Next, please.
Father Conway crossed to Mountjoy Square, he thought, but not for long. Of soldiers and sailors whose legs had been shot off by cannonballs, ending their days in some pauper ward, and of Cardinal Wolsey's words, "If I had served my God as I have served my King, he would not have abandoned me in my old days." He walked by the tree shade of sunny winking leaves, and towards him came the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, MP. "Very well indeed, Father. And you, Father?" Father Conway was wonderfully well indeed. He would go to Buxton, probably for the waters. And her boys, were they getting on well at Belvedere? Oh, was that so? Father Conway was very glad indeed to hear that. And Mr. Sheehy himself, still in London? The house was still sitting, to be sure it was. Beautiful weather it was, delightful indeed. Yes, it was very probable that Father Bernard Vaughan would come again to preach. Oh, yes, a very great success. A wonderful man, really. Next.
Father Conway was very glad to see the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, MP, looking so well. And he begged to be remembered to Mr. David Sheehy, MP. Yes, he would certainly call. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sheehy." Father Conway doffed his silk hat as he took leave, at the jet beads of her mantilla ink shining in the sun, and smiled yet again in going. He had cleaned his teeth, he knew, with an arcanut paste. Father Conway walked, and walking smiled, for he thought on Father Bernard Vaughan's droll eyes and cockney voice. "Pilot, why don't you hold back that owling mob?" The zealous man, however, really he was, and really did good in his way, beyond a doubt. He loved Ireland, he said, and he loved the Irish. Of good family too, one would think it. Welsh, were they not? Oh, lest he forget, that letter to the Father Provincial. Father Conway stopped 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square. Yes, they were from Belvedere. The little house, aha. And were they good boys at school? Oh, that was very good now. And what was his name? Jack Sohan. His name, Ger, Gallagher. And the other little man? His name was Brunny Lynham. Oh, that was a very nice name to have. Father Conway gave a letter from his breast to Master Brunny Lynham and pointed to the red pillar box of the to Skippon Street. But mind you don't post yourself into the box, little man, he said. The boys six-eyed Father Conmee and laughed. Oh, sir. Well, let me see if you can post a letter, Father Conmee said. Master Brody Lynham ran across the road and put Father Conmee's letter to Father Provincial into the mouth of the bright red letterbox. Father Conmee smiled and nodded and smiled and walked along Mount Joyce Square East. Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing, etc., in silk hat, slate frock coat with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves, and pointed patent boots, walking with grave deportment, most respectfully, took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Digham's Court. Was that not Mrs. McGuinness? Next, please.
Mrs. McGuinness, stately, silver-haired, bowed to Father Conmee from the farther footpaths along which she sailed, and Father Conmee smiled and saluted. How did she do? A fine carriage she had, like Mary Queen of Scots, something. And to think that she was a pawnbroker. Well now, what should he say? Such a queenly mien. Father Conmee walked down the Great Charles Street and glanced at the shut-up Free Church on his left. The Reverend T.R. Green, B.A., will D.V. speak. The incumbent, they called him. He felt it incumbent on him to say a few words, but one should be charitable. Invincible ignorance, they acted according to their lights. Father Conmee turned the corner and walked along the North Circular Road. It was a wonder that there was not a tram line in such an important thoroughfare. Surely there ought to be. A band of satcheled schoolboys crossed from Richmond Street, all raised untidy caps. Father Conmee greeted them more than once benignly, Christian brother boys. Father Conmee smelled incense on his right hand as he walked St. Joseph's Church, Portland Row, for aged and virtuous females. Father Conmee raised his hat to the Blessed Sacrament, virtuous, but occasionally they were also bad-tempered. Near Aldborough House, Father Conmee thought of that spendthrift nobleman, and now it was an office or something. Father Conmee began to walk along the North Strand Road and was saluted by Mr. William Gallagher, who stood in the doorway of his shop. Father Conmee saluted Mr. William Gallagher and perceived the odors that came from the bacon flitches and ample cools of butter. He passed Grogan's, the tobacconist, again, which newsboards leaned and told of a dreadful catastrophe in New York. In America, those things were continually happening. Unfortunate people to die like that, unprepared, still an act of perfect contrition. Next, please.
Father Conmee went by Daniel Bergen's public house, against the window of which two unlaboring men lounged. They saluted him, and were saluted. Father Conmee passed H.J. O'Neill's funeral establishment, where Corny Kelleher totted figures in the day book while he chewed a blade of hay. A constable on his beat saluted Father Conmee, and Father Conmee saluted the constable. In Yoke Setters, the pork butchers, Father Conmee observed pigs' puddings, white and black and red, lying neatly curled in tubes. Moored under the trees of Charleville Mall, Father Conmee saw a turf barge, a tow horse with pendant head, a bargeman with a hat of dirty straw, seated amidships, smoking and staring at a branch of poplar above him. It was idyllic, and Father Conmee reflected on the providence of the Creator, who had made turf to be in bogs, where men might dig it out and bring it to town and hamlet to make fires in the houses of poor people. On Newcomen Bridge, Very Reverend Father John Conmee, S.J. of St. Francis Xavier's Church, Upper Gardiner Street, stepped on to an outward-bound tram. Off an inward-bound tram stepped the Reverend Nicholas Dudley, C.C. of St. Agatha's Church, North William Street, on to Newcomen Bridge. Susan.
At Newcomen Bridge, Father Conmee stepped into an outward bound train, for he disliked to traverse on foot the dingy way past Mud Island. Father Conmee sat in a corner of the tramcar, a blue ticket tucked with care in the eye of one plump kid glove, while 4 shillings, a sixpence, and 5 pennies shooted from his other plump glove palm into his purse. Passing the Ivy Church, he reflected that the ticket inspector usually made his visit when one had carelessly thrown away the ticket. The solemnity of the occupants of the car seemed to Father Conmee excessive for a journey so short and cheap. Father Conmee liked cheerful decorum. It was a peaceful day. The gentleman with the glasses opposite Father Conmee had finished explaining and looked down. His wife, Father Conmee supposed. A tiny yawn opened the mouth of the wife of the gentleman with the glasses. She raised her small gloved fist, yawned ever so gently, tip-tapping her small gloved fist on her opening mouth, and smiled tinily, sweetly. Father Conmee perceived her perfume in the car. He perceived also that the awkward man on the other side of her was sitting on the edge of the seat. Father Conmee at the altar rails placed the host with difficulty in the mouth of the awkward old man who had the shaky head. Next, please.
At Annesley's Bridge, the tram halted, and when it was about to go, an old woman rose suddenly from her place to alight. The conductor pulled the belt strap to stay the car for her. She passed out with her basket and a market net, and Father Conmee saw the conductor help her and net and basket down. And Father Conmee thought that, as she had nearly passed the end of the penny fare, she was one of those good souls who had always to be told twice, "Bless you, my child," that they have been absolved. Pray for me. But they had so many worries in life, so many cares, poor creatures. From the hoardings, Mr. Eugene Stratton grinned with thick nigger lips at Father Conmee. Father Conmee thought of the souls of black and brown and yellow men, and of his sermon of St. Peter Claver's Day, and the African mission, and of the propagation of the faith, and of the millions of black and brown and yellow souls that had not received the baptism of water when their last hour came, like a thief in the night. That book by the Belgian Jesuit, Le Nombre d'Eros, seemed to Father Conmee a reasonable plea. Those were millions of human souls created by God in his own likeness, to whom the faith had not, brackets, been brought. But they were God's souls, created by God. It seemed to Father Conmee pity that they should all be lost. A waste, if one might say. Next, please, Dave.
At the Health Road stop, Father Conmee alighted and was saluted by the conductor, and saluted in his turn. The Malahide Road was quiet. It pleased Father Conmee, road and name. The joy bells were ringing in gay Malahide. Lord Talbot de Malahide, intermediate hereditary Lord Admiral of Malahide and the seas adjoining. Then came the call to arms, and she was maid and wife and widow in one day. Those were old worldish days, loyal times in joyous townlands, old times in the barony. Father Conmee, walking, thought of his little book, Old Times in the Barony, and of the book that might be written about Jesuit houses, and of Mary Rochford, daughter of Lord Molesworth, first Countess of Belvedere. A listless lady, no more young, walked alone the shore of Lough Ennell, Mary, first Countess of Belvedere, listlessly walking in the evening, not startled when an otter plunged. Who could know the truth? Not the jealous Lord Belvedere, and not her confessor, if she had not committed adultery fully. Jaculato seminis inter vas naturel mulieris, with her husband's brother, She would half confess if she had not all sinned as women did. Only God knew, and she and he, her husband's brother. Father Conmee thought of that tyrannous incontinence, needed, however, for man's race on earth, and of the ways of God, which were not our ways. Don John Conmee walked and moved in times of yore. He was humane and honored there. He bore in mind secrets confessed, and he smiled at smiling noble faces in a beeswax drawing room, ceilinged with full fruit clusters, and the hands of a bride and of a bridegroom, noble to noble, were empalmed by Father John Conmee. It was a charming day. Bill?
You're on mute, Bill.
My apologies. The lich gate of a field showed Father Conmee breadths of cabbages curtsying to him with ample underleaves. The sky showed him a flock of small white clouds going slowly down the wind. Moutonné, the French said, a homely and just word. Father Conmee, reading his office, watched a flock of muttoning clouds over Rathcoffey. His thin-socked ankles were tickled by the stubble of Clongo's field. He walked there, reading in the evening, and heard the cries of the boys' lines at their play, young cries in the quiet evening. He was their rector. His reign was mild. Father Conmee drew off his gloves and took his red-edged breviary out. An ivory bookmark told him the page. Nones. He should have read that before lunch, but Lady Maxwell had come. Next.
Father Conmee read in secret Pater and Ave and crossed his breast. Deus in adoritum. He walked calmly and read mutely, the nuns walking and reading till he came to res in Beati Immaculati, Principitum verborum tutorum veratis, et aeternum omnia Iduciae justica tuae. A flushed young man came from a gap of a hedge, and after him came a young woman with wild nodding daisies in her hand. The young man raised his cap abruptly. The young woman abruptly bent, and with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. Father Conmee blessed both gravely and turned the thin page of his breviary. Sin, principes persecutis stunt me grace, et a verbis tuus formidavit cor meum. Corny Kelleher closed his long day book and glanced with his drooping eyes at a pine coffin lid centred in a corner. He pulled himself erect, went to it, and spinning on its axle, viewed its shape and brass furnishings. Chewing his blade of hay, he laid the coffin lid by and came to the doorway. There he tilted his hat brim, gave shade to his eyes, and leaned against the doorcase, looking idly out. Father John Conmee stepped into Dollymount tram on Newcomen Bridge. Corny Kelleher locked his large-footed boots and gazed, his hat down tilted, chewing his blade of hay. Constable 57C, on his beat, stood to pass the time of day. "That's a fine day, Mr. Kelleher." "Ah," Corny Kelleher said. "It's very close," the constable said. Corny Kelleher sped a silent jest of hay juice arcing from his mouth with a generous white arm from a window in Eccles Street, flung forth the coin. "What's the best news?" he asked. "I see that particular party last evening," the constable said with bated breath. "Next, please."
One-legged.
Weren't we going to just discuss each section as we finished
Right.
it?
Ah, thank you for the reminder.
Oh,
Okay.
I beg
so
your
we-
pardon, sorry.
No,
Yes,
that's right.
yes.
Okay, so the first section is the Father Conmee section. So discuss.
Well, an interesting name that Father Conmee has.
Yeah, Conmee. I So in reading it the second time, it cleared up the story of the three boys. So there are three boys from Belvedere. Those are the young boys that he's talking to somewhat patronizingly, but that's probably because he's familiar with the lower school at Belvedere. And then Clongo's Field. Clongo's is the school where he is director.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, he also passes a group of Christian Brother boys. So there's three different groups of kids. And he only interacts with the Belvedere boys, the young boys from Belvedere, I guess. Not that that matters much, but last week we were wondering, I can't remember who, but somebody was wondering why he was so condescending to those boys, or so I don't know. Thought he
Yeah.
might be actually a little cruel to them, but
Yeah, I don't see it that way at all. I
no.
mean, he is certainly joking and condescending, but they're young boys,
Mhm.
you know, and I think his behavior is completely appropriate, other than the fact they're just going to think of him as an old priest, going about the day. He's not going to impress them very much. But yeah, condescending in this particular case seems completely appropriate.
Mhm. The other
Can
thing that struck me
expand on
today
that?
about the Corny Kelleher, I could place them now. They're by J.H. O'Neill's funerary establishment on North Circular Road. And it's kind of confusing to a lot of people because at the same time, Molly is throwing a coin to the sailor.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
you might think that they're on Eccles Street, but Corny Kelleher and the policeman are not on Eccles Street.
Right.
They're up on North Circular Road by the funeral host, because Corny's looking at a coffin and spinning it around. And
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right.
but who they're talking about, then we don't know. I mean, if you mistakenly think they're on Eccles Street and that they're watching the coin being flung by a white arm, you might think that Corny is talking about Molly, that he's seen that particular party. But in fact, it's just an indication. I know later on, or whenever earlier on, Bloom has the impression or the idea that Corny is a policeman's tout, that he's
Yeah, an informant.
an informant for the castle, and so here's an incidence of him doing exactly that. But
I want to go back to Father Comney here, and at least to me, this constant referring to Father Conme in a
Yeah.
formal manner. I mean, the simplest we get is Father Comney, and then we get Father John Comney, S.J., and then it's almost like by using all these formal names, at least to me, it's communicating that Father Comney lives in this extremely structured, regularized world. And he views everybody should be living in such a regular way. Yeah, there's this thing on the second page there where it says, Don John Comney walked and moved in times of yore.
well, he lives in his head the way Bloom does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was thinking about the old times in the barony and about Lady Belvedere and her infidelity with her brother and the old stories, and so then he puts himself back there. And I think maybe all those references to Father Conmee are how he thinks of himself. He can't think of himself in any other way except
Right.
as Father Conmee. And maybe that's also why he behaves the way he does. He plays that role very seriously, and that's who he is. He is Father Conmee, and so he's addressed by Mrs. Guinness and by Lady Sheehy and by the boys. They all respect him. Anyone he sees, he's automatically respected because he's wearing the collar.
Right.
And he purports himself or that way.
He's on stage 24/7 as Father John Comney, both to the public and apparently to himself.
And Bill, just to tag on to the comparison with Bloom, of course, both of them are wanting tram lines put in different areas.
Yeah,
Bloom,
the exact same thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
I thought the one sailor beggar looking for alms, he was outside the convent of the Sisters of Charity, and what he got for his trouble was a blessing. Also, Lady Maxwell, I have a question, sorry. Lady Maxwell, that paragraph, Dennis J. McGeaney, Professor of Dancing, down a small bit, walking with grave deportment, most respectfully, took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell. Oh, so it's Lady Maxwell is passing McGeaney. Because it was Lady Maxwell delayed Conmee leaving.
It's interesting that it's lady with the small L.
Indeed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. True. Yeah, because he should have done his breviary before lunch, but Lady Maxwell had called.
But I was interested in the superior, the very Reverend John Thomas. And it struck me that he's going around there looking and thinking he's carrying an awful lot of information, because some of these people confessed to him. Like the old lady was never happy to be absolved. And then the adulterous woman, he knows all this information. So he's going around going, he's looking at all these people.
Yeah. It's like the CIA.
Well, it could be a double meaning. I mean, he might have been the superior general of the or Jesuit order at that time too. So that would have been his title, actually. Not that he was acting in a superior manner. And in this case, we don't know if it's capitalized because it's all in caps, or is it?
Where is it? That's what I'm looking for, Lady Maxwell.
Well, she's page 282 and 287.
Okay, it's the lady that's all small, all small letters.
But
the
first sentence of the episode, it's all in caps. The superior, the very Reverend John Conmee S.J. reset his, and then it goes to lowercase.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm actually referring to Lady Maxwell.
Right. But that's just an indication that this is a new episode.
I don't have that in my text. It's all lowercase.
Yeah, it's all lowercase.
Even the Maxwell, even the M for the Maxwell.
No, the lady is lowercase, but M is capital.
Oh.
But in the Wordsworth edition, every new section begins with capitals.
Right.
Yeah.
But just one, James, is it? Or a series of capitals?
The first line is always all capitals.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the same with my Modern Library edition.
So sorry, just a sec. I don't have this. So are you saying, Jim, that each letter in the first line is capitalized?
Yes. Okay. In the Wordsworth.
Okay,
not in all editions.
I'm looking at Wordsworth.
Not in mine either.
In mine only the first letter of each section is capitalized, but not all the letters.
Could I
go back again and look at our chapters.
About the general narrative strategy of this wandering rocks. I mean, looking at my guidebooks, all these little details will be discovered or resolved by the end. But while reading it, it seems like an intricate automaton, jewel works, where pieces are intersecting and the consciousness is being handed from one character to another. You notice Conmee goes back in time to when he was administering the sacraments, and then to his ancestor. And that privilege will be passed on to some, though not all, of the walk-on characters who will lead various sections. And I don't understand the point except to admire James Joyce's cleverness, his mastery of London geography, and of a really detailed tapestry of life in 1906.
Yeah, well, this is like one of those medieval paintings where you have many, many different scenes kind of stitched together in a quilt work. And that first thing about the coin, we have Corny Kelleher, her sped of hay juice, blah, 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 while a generous white arm from the window of Eccles Street flung forth the coin. So this is the first real indication that we've got different times and space happening in this section. Because as Bill pointed out, this is Molly throwing a coin to the one-legged sailor.
But we don't know that.
We don't know that.
Not at this stage.
So we're just giving little, think of it, I like to think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. And, you get pieces and then you get to put a couple pieces together and you go, oh, wait, that's looking like this is a whole unit by itself. And it's this, it is very clever, but I think it's more than clever. I think at least to me, it communicates the fact that no matter how absorbed we are in our particular time and space, there's all this other stuff going on at the same time in different spaces.
Okay.
And I think that's an important part for us human beings to realize, because we get caught up in our own little dramas and forget there are other thousands, millions of other dramas. And does somebody have access to that? There's a chart that someone made that kind of shows wandering rocks. So when Father Comney is, for example, talking to the boys about posting something, at the same time, there's this other person doing this other thing at the same time in a different place.
Wow.
Yeah, well, if you're a first-time reader, you get very little of that. The more times you read it, the more you realize, wait, so all right, these are the same people that Father Conmee passed by, or this was happening then, and now it's happening in a different place, or we're seeing them at the same time in the same place that Father Conmee saw them, but we're getting to look at them more closely. It's very cinematic, I guess.
Right. Right. The Bill on that point, I think of Tarantino's Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Where he mixes things up. And I think whoever said you don't get all this first time through is right. But as you read it again and again, and you see they're called intrusions, at least the critic I read called them intrusions. And the first one we get is when he talks about Magini, and then we get Molly dealing with the lame sailor and so forth. But when you sort of start to get a handle on what's happening, I think it causes great delight, because it shows us how carefully Joyce is knitting everything together.
Yeah.
In this panoramic view of the city, it's just brilliant, but it's hard to get the first 2 or 3 times through it.
Right.
If I could back up, Duncan, I'd like to throw it back to you, if I could. You talked about Connie's condescension being appropriate when he was talking to the boys, and I was just wondering, could you elaborate on that a bit? That kind of piqued my curiosity.
Would you repeat your question, David?
I could. I got a feeling I interrupted you doing some research here. Do you want me to wait until you do the research?
No, what happened was, for some reason, I got kicked off of Zoom.
Oh, okay. So my question was, you had said at one point that you thought that Connie's condescension, and I think it was towards the 3 boys, was appropriate. It kind of piqued my curiosity. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Like, why was the condescension appropriate?
You must be talking to Bill, because I have a different. I just look at it as a priest talking to little boys and being very jocular with them.
Okay. I maybe misheard then. I mean, I thought that there was some condescension there, but it was because Clongowes was sort of higher up the social hierarchy than Belvedere, and these were Belvedere boys, but thank goodness they weren't Christian Brother boys.
Oh yeah, that to me is a totally different thing, and is kind of a fun thing, because what does he say? He says something. Oh God, what is the expression that he uses to go, well, you can't really expect them Protestants to be in another way.
Invincible ignorance?
Invincible ignorance.
Yeah.
Which,
Oh, there it is.
how many times do we individually go throughout the day when we label people as being invincibly ignorant?
I think that might be a theological term. Joe, do you know?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Let me check. I'll do a bit of research.
You were speaking about, Duncan?
There's actually a graphic. Yeah, that's a good one too. But there's actually
It's
one down there
geographic, and it lists the episodes.
okay.
Oh.
Okay, and this is from that.
That's from
Oh, Ulysses annotated.
It's also said that when Joyce was writing this episode, that he had a map of Dublin beside him.
Yeah.
And the stopwatch. See how long it would take.
One of the points that struck me quite forcibly was in the last episode, we had about a half a dozen characters. In this one, we have over 60 characters. It's all action, in other words, whereas there was very little action in the last episode. I'm not saying there's a reason for this, but it's just an interesting point.
And there seems to be an alternation between people who are on the move, like Father Conmee, and people who are in a fixed location, like Corny Kelleher and the Daedalus children and so on. And it seems to more or less alternate between movement and stasis.
I did find something out about invincible ignorance. I put it on the chat for those of you who, like myself, want to go down that wormhole. It is a theological term.
I can imagine it even be could be narrowed down to being a Jesuit term.
Dave, you're sending us down a rabbit hole. That's what's happening.
I definitely am.
Yeah.
The residue of a Catholic boyhood, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
Shall we pick up our narrative?
Just before you go on, Dave, could
I'll let you there, Jane.
Onward.
Sorry, Anne, could I just throw in a little interesting factoid? Where we were having our lesson or lecture on Ulysses in the James Joyce Centre. It takes place in the Daniel J. McGinney room, which I only discovered last evening. And hanging on the wall is a caricature of the same Daniel J. McGinney, who apparently was originally Daniel J. McGinn, but he thought that he would make his name a little bit more sexy by calling it McGinney. And we've seen the description of him as essentially a fop. As I say, that's just a piece of information.
All right. Great.
Susan, you raised the issue, I think, last time about and it came up here about the fact that we weren't using pronouns to talk about Father Conmee, that there's this constant reiteration of it. And is there an element of condescension on Joyce's part that he's treating him almost like a character from a children's book where you see Spot run, Spot passes the ball, Spot loves his owner kind of thing? I just wondered about that.
You can look at it that way, I think, but I think it's the way Father John Conmee thinks of himself. That he does not think of himself as a regular old pronoun he. That he has the dignity of his office, which is his life's mission. And it's incumbent upon him to always, as I mentioned earlier, to be on stage. When he's in public, he is to be the Reverend Don Father Conmee. And even when I can imagine when he's at home in his resting place, that he still keeps his role on.
So is he also, like, my understanding, he's a real person. Is that correct? That he taught Joyce? Bill, is that right?
He's based on a real
Yeah.
person, yeah. I mean,
Was
there was a Father Conmee at Belvedere when Joyce was there.
Okay, all right, okay, fair enough. And I guess the other thing before we leave, I mean, is this a condescending portrait of the man, or am I overreacting?
No, I think Joyce was actually very fond of him.
That's what I heard too, and yet
In
I don't
fact,
find
he
this
was the
portrait.
one. Well, I think he's comes across as a very amiable person. I mean, he greets everybody with a smile on his face and pats the boys on the head. I mean, he's a nice guy. So I don't see that. It's just I think I'm more, I guess, like Duncan. It's his title. He's
Okay.
Father Conmee. There is one instance in my edition. It's on page 217. Where he is thinking and he says, "Oh, lest he forget." He doesn't say,
okay.
Oh, lest Father Conmee forget." He says, "Oh, lest he forget that letter to Father Provincial."
Okay, fair enough. So you folks aren't really, I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I'm seeing him as somewhat smug and self-righteous.
You could be absolutely right, Dave.
Fair
I
enough.
see that too.
I don't see it. I mean, he's snug. I would say rather than smug, he's snug. He's snug in his role. He's Father Conmee. He wants to be the nice, wise, beneficent father.
Well, I'm not even sure he wants to be. That's who he is. I mean, that's what the
Yeah,
function
okay.
the function of a priest is, that very thing. You are concerned for your flock and you know them all, and you ask, you pass the time of day, you ask them how they're doing, but on the other hand, you also know all their secrets if you're their confessor.
I think you guys are being very generous to him.
Okay.
I agree with Dave. I think he's a smug old bastard.
Well, I see.
Right.
I'm not a Catholic.
Okay.
So I have no.
Who let you in here?
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I'm like Bloom. I wandered into the church to get out of the sun,
Have a look around.
pass a little time, and found myself here with all you Catholics. But I have a question. So is Father Conmee the director of the school in that scene with Stephen Dedalus after his Father Doylan punishes him and he goes to complain?
Yeah, and he's very nice to Stephen, and he has a joke. He knows Simon, he knows Stephen's father, and that's the same guy. And he's the same way in that story. It comes out that, they were all talking about it and, what a bright kid this is. And, but he has to, in dealing with Joyce, he probably made a mistake. You have to be, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he meant to hurt you, or, accuse you of anything. I think it was just a misunderstanding. And then he talks to Simon later on about it, and they laugh about it. What a serious young man this is, and how sensitive and the like. But
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
portrait, he doesn't come across as being smug. I
Okay.
don't think.
Yeah, Joe, you have something to say about all this.
Just a point that historically in real life, Father Conmee is the man who got Stephen into Belvedere
Right.
after the downward slope of the family finances took him out of Clongowes, and he went round to the Christian Brothers O'Connell School, and it was Father Conmee, while talking to his father, organized a scholarship. So Mr. Joyce Jr. owes an awful lot to Father Conmee.
Uh-huh.
So that's just a historical point.
Yeah.
Joyce referred to him.
In the
Joyce
book.
referred to him as a bland and courtly humanist.
Bland and courtly humans. Okay, well, that's not a.
That's not bad. He was rector of Clongowes. You probably know that, John.
Yes, he was indeed, and he became the superior of the Jesuit order in Ireland in 1905.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of kind of time travel going on here, calling him the superior.
Right.
But that's okay. But Mr. Joyce was never really a person to remember a favor. He said, never do a favor, or you'll end up in his books, as something that you wouldn't like. Anyway, that's a little bit of cynicism thrown in at the end by me. So
yeah. Well, okay, I think we should go on. I do want to mention one last thing though, which is on the second page where right towards the top, at least in the Wordsworth thing, it says, Father Comney thought of the tyrannous incontinence needed for men's race on earth, and of the ways of God which were not our ways. And then at the very bottom, you have a flushed young man came from the gap of the hedge, and after him came a young woman with wild nodding daisies in her hand. With slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig. So, this is Father Comney knows exactly what was going on there, but he's a proper diplomat and a forgiving man, and he just takes note of it and lets it go.
Well, he does more than take note. He blesses them gravely. So he lets them know he knows. But he lets them on, and then he's and it keeps reading in his breviary, and the first word is sin.
Yeah.
So this is exactly what he's been musing
I think
about.
it's a very strange reaction from a Catholic priest at the time that he didn't threaten them with fire and brimstone for their sinful ways.
Well, the couple are Lynch, and I think Kitty is her name.
Yeah.
Kitty
Ricketts.
Perhaps, yes.
Perhaps,
and we meet them later. But later on, Joyce, we mustn't jump too far ahead of ourselves, but he does take Conmee a great compliment when he next mentions him further on in the book. So it's there. But you see, I think Conmee here, as I'm blurbering out to take an over place, but Conmee is he represents the church.
Mm-hmm.
So that's he's a metaphor for the whole church. And the wondering, this is the bookends of the episode.
Yeah.
He's one of the rocks that the character's been squeezed by. Irish society. So it's the role of the church. And there you get it, the dreadful incontinence that procreation depends upon, that's he stands for Catholic doctrine.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good because, of course, the church is founded on St. Peter, the rock.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Comney, you could look at Comney in this first section as a wandering rock.
And we're going to meet the British viceroy as the other rock.
Other end, exactly.
Well, except Scylla and Charybdis are not rocks. One's a whirlpool.
but we're not in.
But we're
Scylla.
no, I know that's right. These are
Yeah.
the wandering rocks.
We're in the wandering rocks.
Okay, that's right. Which
It's
does
okay.
not
That's
not
okay.
have.
different dangers.
But we
Yeah.
have, and you see that the one rock is on the north side of the city,
Gotcha.
and the other rock will it starts just at the edge of the north side, but it's mainly on the south side, and all these little ants are squeezed in between these two processes of thought.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so that's it, and then all the characters have shrunk in size. They all like ants. Even Stephen and Bloom don't get
it is kind of
practically every important character in the book is running around in this episode, and it's very cinematic, as Bill said, and it's really recreating a silent movie. That's what all that in and out stuff is that you were describing. Anyway, but that's just my understanding of it, guys. I'm just throwing in my tuppence.
Yeah, no, it's good though. It's good. We won't take it as gospel, but we'll take it as a really good indication and possible gospel.
The gospel according to Joe.
According to Joe, yeah.
Gospel according to Joe. There we go. So let me
No,
check.
and of course we know that the wandering rocks are only mentioned in Homer. There is no actual story about them. There's Ulysses does nothing to do with them. He avoids them.
He's told to go the other route, which was
right.
But avoid them. And it's interesting. I mean, we're not start talking about the possible origin of the story, but let's not talk about classical history and wandering rocks, because
interesting. Joyce put in the episode later. Sorry, Joyce put this episode in after completing the novel.
And it's a centerpiece of the book, even though we're not halfway through.
It's like a Stormbreaker,
and it's the end of the initial style. We're about to go into
galloping on,
things, and people, some lecturers will say this is where a new character emerges in the book, and that character is the city of Dublin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a good way. I don't know if I agree with it completely, but it's a nice way to think about it.
Sure.
One of my teachers always said, always say yay, yay, but keep a firm seat. Go everywhere, do everything, talk to everybody, say yay, yay, and keep a firm seat.
Right.
So, Jane, do you know that we are at page 202 in Wordsworth, and it starts, a one-legged sailor crutched himself round?
Thank you. I didn't know that. And also, I wanted to ask you to take me off the reading today because I have a cold. So I'll just listen. Okay.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm the next reader. So
Okay.
I will begin reading. A one-legged sailor crutched himself round McConnell's corner, skirting Rabiotti's ice cream car, and jerked himself up Eccles Street. Towards Larry O'Rourke, in shirt sleeves in his doorway, he growled amiably, "For England!" He swung himself violently forward, past Katie and Booty deadless, halted and growled, "Home and beauty!" J. O'Malloy's white, careworn face was told that Mr. Lambert was in the warehouse with a visitor. A stout lady stopped, took a copper coin from her purse, and dropped it into the cup held out to her. The sailor grumbled thanks and glanced sourly at the unheeding windows, sank his head, and swung himself forward 4 strides. Next.
He halted and growled angrily, "For England." 2 barefoot urchins sucking long licorice laces halted near him, gaping at his stump with their yellow slobbered mouths. He swung himself forward in vigorous jerks, halted, lifted his head towards a window, and bayed deeply, "Home and beauty." The gay, sweet chirping, whistling within went on a bar or 2, ceased. The blind of the window was drawn aside. A card unfurnished apartment slipped from the sash and fell. A plump, bare, generous arm shone was seen, held forth from a white petticoat bodice and taut shift straps. A woman's head flung forth a coin over the area railings. It fell onto the path. One of the urchins ran to it, picked it up, and dropped it into the minstrel's cap, saying, "There, sir. Next."
You want to pause here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right. Points, questions, comments about this short section here?
So I just would point out, and I think I got this from Gifford's notes, that the intrusion here is J.J. O'Malloy's white careworn face was told that Mr. Lambert was in the warehouse with a visitor. That gets picked up in section 8, but it doesn't really, again, it's a way of knitting things together in my view, but it doesn't really have anything to do with this section unless somebody's seeing a link that I've missed.
No, that's
Well, I would.
I mean, we'll see Ned Lambert talking to the Reverend Love about the, photographs and the like, but that's later.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in here. It's just to indicate that other things are happening at the same time.
Right, because we have that bare arm
Right.
throwing the money out. So there's our, at least to my knowledge, there is our first indication that the sections have ties between them. And then I just wanted to point, so this is a really trivial question, but and maybe there's something different about licorice in Dublin, but the idea that the boys who are sucking on long licorice laces have yellow slobbered mouths doesn't make sense. I would think their mouths would be black.
Yeah, licorice can come in red colors. It comes in other colors. It used to come in more than just red and black.
Okay. That clears that up. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was I really find it sweet that the urchins, one of the urchins ran over and picked up the coin and took it over and dropped it in the minstrel's cup.
That's unexpected.
Well, the word urchin to me always connotes a little bit of desperation.
Yeah.
And coming from a poor home, and the fact that because
I think they're often just referred to as street urchins, meaning these are
kids
just
on the street.
kids hanging around, but they're generally of a lower class. Doesn't mean they're necessarily ne'er-do-wells or
but they were very likely to be hungry, and you would expect them to take that money and run.
Except they've been sucking on licorice, so they got some money somewhere for licorice, for sweets, not just food. They're not starving, obviously, or they would have bought buns instead of licorice.
Okay.
Unless they stole the licorice. No.
Well,
and Father Conmee is the only one that knows that.
True.
And
Well,
he's not telling.
They are barefoot, so they're kind of, they're unlikely to be the children of a brain surgeon.
Right. Well, unless he practices on his own children, and they're a bit addled.
Could be.
Did I mention the word plump that's being used here? Does anybody see a parallel with the beginning of the story where stately plump Buck Mulligan appears? We hear
you mean the plump, bare, generous arm?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe reading too much into it.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to go that far myself at this time.
Okay.
Is the plump, generous arm though the same as the generous white arm from a window in Eccles Street of the previous section? I mean,
Yeah.
It is in my mind,
Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
because
because
there's also
he's
the
on,
coin.
and the sailor's on Eccles Street now. He's turned the corner from Dorset onto Eccles, and he's going down Eccles past the grocer, whatever,
Larry O'Rourke's.
or Larry O'Rourke's, yeah. And
Right.
then he hits 7 Eccles.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really the clincher in my mind is the coin being thrown over the area railings to the sailor.
Exactly. That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
So
Area
that's
railings.
that's what stitches the two together in my mind. All righty, shall we go to Katie and
Can I
Boo?
ask one question?
Of
What's
course.
the significance of the? Thank you. What's the significance of unfurnished apartments?
Well, the Blooms have been advertising a room to let. I mean, they've got, because Millie's not there anymore, so they need to make an extra. Well, I don't know if they need to, but they want to make some extra money.
Yeah.
So they're going to let a
Thank you.
room out, and they've got the sign in the window. And I think much later on, when Bloom's thinking about Stephen moving into that room.
Yeah.
But yeah. They're
Okay,
looking for a boarder.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, because I didn't know whether it was a place next door to the Blooms or that's good.
Okay.
Katie makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Katie and Booty Daedalus shoved in the door of the close steaming kitchen. Did you put in the books? Booty asked. Maggie at the range rammed down a greyish mass beneath, bubbling suds twice, and her potstick, with her potstick, and wiped her brow. They wouldn't give me anything on them, she said. Father Conmee walked through Clongo's fields, his thin-socked ankles tickled by stubble. Where did you try? Booty asked. McGinnis's. Booty stamped her foot and threw her satchel on the table. Bad cess to her big face, she cried. Katie went to the range and peered with squinting eyes. What's in the pot? She asked. Shirts, Maggie said. Booty cried angrily. Crikey, is there nothing for us to eat? Katie, lifting the kettle lid in a pad of her stained skirt, asked, and what's in this? A heavy fume gushed in answer. Pea soup, Maggie said. Where did you get it? Katie asked. Sister Mary Patrick, Maggie said. A lackey rang his bell. Barang. Booty sat down at the table and said hungrily, give us it here. Maggie poured yellow, thick soup from the kettle into a bowl. Katie, sitting opposite Booty, said quietly as her fingertip lifted to her mouth random crumbs. Good job we have that much. Where's Dilly? Gone to meet father, Maggie said. Booty, breaking big chunks of bread into the yellow soup, added, Our Father who art not in heaven. Maggie, pouring yellow soup into Katie's bowl, exclaimed, Booty, for shame. A skiff, a crumpled throwaway, Elijah's coming, rode lightly down the Liffey under Loop Line Bridge, shooting the rapids where water chafed round the bridge piers, sailing eastward past hulls and anchor chains between the Custom House Old Dock and George's.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly different time scales within that section. I mean, just that last paragraph, for example, refers to the piece of paper that we continue to see throughout the story.
Yeah.
And Father Conmee walking in Clongo's fields and the home scene with Booty and Katie and Maggie.
And Dilly at the auctioneers with their father. And
yeah.
Right.
Waiting for him. He's possibly might just still be in the Oval Bar, but she knows he's going to be going to the auction rooms.
Right, but we hear the bell ringing. The lackey of the auction room rings his bell.
The auctions are underway, and
right.
passed by and said that her dress is in flitters. That's the Dilly.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they're the cameras shots cutting into one another.
Mm.
We're used to that now in the cinema,
Mhm.
but this was all new at the time in 1904, I suppose,
Mhm.
and the
Mhm.
whole idea of those rapid cuts and the piece of paper has got down as far as George's key. You see,
Yeah, it's
it's going
brilliant.
out now. You see, it might have been coming in when Bloom threw it. So
It's amazing.
oh yes,
It no doubt mystified readers of the day, especially
yeah.
most readers, I think, assume that you read a novel, you just read it, and that's the end of it. But this book is, Joyce knew people would have to read it again and again
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
again and again.
Mhm.
And that's why he told us about Knockinander and what's the other one?
Nebenander.
Yeah.
Knockinander at the start, because that's what's happening in the book.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
he's
One after another, or one next to each other.
yeah. Naban is beside each other, and Knox one. So it's Indian file or line abreast, and
Yes.
and that was technically supposed to be not possible in
Mm.
writing. That it had to be in painting,
Right.
and now we're getting painting appearing. So like we already had a newspaper, now we've got a movie.
Mhm. Mhm.
See.
And this may or may not be related, but also people, the London Illustrated, is that I believe it was called, where they were bringing in, it was like a color thing of different articles from, there'd be global news and there'd be local news and there'd be scandal news and there'd be all that. This kind of modern thing of just throwing in different things and calling it a news outlet.
Yes.
And the London Illustrated Weekly, I think it was like one of the first of these, where they would have people bring, they would print drawings, and then they introduced photographs.
Mm.
Um, and that was, I believe, kind of a new thing. But people were getting used to this kind of random hodgepodge mashup, which is kind of what a newspaper is. A newspaper is a mashup of all kinds of different stuff, which
Yeah.
we're so used to it, we don't even think it's unusual, but it's really unusual.
Good point. And doesn't Bloom mention that as well at the start of the
There were certainly very popular comic strips, which would have been full page, full color
yeah.
strips, usually in a weekly supplement. But it also, there's an element of that in here, in that there's action implied in the drawing, and then there's speech or thought.
Mhm.
We have thought bubbles, which is
Mhm.
what stream of consciousness is. We have direct address, which is characters talking to one another. So, I mean, I think Joyce was very well aware of all of those other media and what they were doing with language and with story in particular.
Mhm.
Not just language, but how to tell a story. How do you tell a story? Well, you do it.
Mhm.
You can do it so many different ways, and Joyce is trying all of them.
Yeah, and that's the experimental nature of this novel.
Yeah.
It's an experimental novel. So
Well, let's throw the Volta experience into this as well. His attempt at a movie theater in Dublin, which
yeah,
was, he saw lots of movies of the time
yeah.
in Trieste. And the nature of movies at that time, I've seen, probably others of you have seen it too, the schedule at the Volta Theater. And there would be these disconnected, some of it would be animal stuff and others would be,
Oh yeah,
it was all short disconnected pieces.
yeah,
And you'd buy your ticket and go into a movie theater, and then you would see maybe 6 or 7 different short films
yeah,
that did not necessarily have any connection between each other.
yeah, yeah.
Look at here, we have Ian. Owen, are you there? He's connecting to audio now. Hello, Owen.
Here is your suite room key. I gave you two just in case.
Somebody's there.
Hello. Hi, Duncan.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice
Hey.
surprise. Good to
Hello.
see you.
How are
Yeah.
you?
Good, good. We are in.
Sorry for interrupting halfway through.
No problem.
You're fine.
No problem. We're actually talking about different episodes in the Wandering Rocks and getting into all kinds of things. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to point out one thing that struck me, which may or may not be relevant. You know, we had that thing where Molly throws the coin falls in the street, the urchin picks up the coin, takes it and puts it in the beggar's cup, and
Yeah,
immediately.
I think it's his cap, but I could be wrong.
Cap. Oh yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Cap. Okay, but then we immediately go to older starving children, the Daedalus girls.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see any particular connection. Obviously, street urchins sucking licorice. These kids don't have licorice. They've got poorhouse soup that they got from the nuns,
Yeah.
and somehow they got a loaf of bread. It's just another incident in what's going on in Dublin. And we don't know. I mean, obviously, there's no way of knowing, but some people have wondered if the sailor we meet in the cabman shelter later on is this same sailor who's untied his leg and no longer is a one-legged sailor, but just as an old sailor, telling these tall tales. But during the day, he ties his leg up and goes around begging, pretending he's a war veteran, an amputee. Who knows?
So he's folding his leg behind and tying it,
and then and has the leg of his pants tied up so it looks like a stump. We don't, it's possible, but
yeah,
there's no way of
knowing.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we try one more section before we wrap it up today? And the next reader is
Me.
Okay. Onward.
Hi. The blonde girl in Thornton's bedded the wicker basket with wrestling fiber. Blazes Boylan handed her the bottles swathed in tissue paper in a small jar. Put these in first, will you? He said. Yes, sir, the blonde girl said, and the fruit on top. That'll do, game ball, Blazes Boylan said. She bestowed fat pears neatly, head by tail, and among them ripe, shamefaced peaches. Blazes Boylan walked here and there in new tan shoes about the fruit-smelling shop, lifting fruits, young, juicy, crinkled, and plump red tomatoes, sniffing smells. HELYS filed before him, tall white-hatted, past Tangier Lane, plodding towards their goal. He turned suddenly from a chip of strawberries, drew a gold watch from his fob, and held it at its chain's length. Can you send them by tram now? A dark-backed figure under Merchant's Arch scanned books on the hawker's cart. Joe.
Certainly, sir. Is it in the city? Oh, yes, Blazes Boylan said. 10 minutes. The blonde girl handed him a docket and a pencil. Will you write the address, sir? Blazes Boylan at the counter wrote and pushed the docket to her. Send it at once, will you? He said. It's for an invalid. Yes, sir, I will, sir. Blazes Boylan rattled merry money in his trousers pocket. What's the damage? He asked. The blonde girl's slim fingers reckoned the fruits. Blazes Boylan looked into the cut of her blouse, the young pullet. He took a red carnation from the tall stem glass. This for me? He asked gallantly. The blonde girl glanced sideways at him, got up regardless, with his tie a bit crooked, blushing. Yes, sir, she said. Bending archly, she reckoned again fat pears and blushing peaches. Blazes Boylan looked in her blouse with more favour, the stalk of the red flower between his smiling teeth. May I say a word to your telephone, missy? He asked roguishly. That's the end of a section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it? Oh, yeah.
Do you want us to go on, Duncan?
Hmm?
Do you want us to continue on or to pause? That's for me, there's the end of a section, I think.
Yeah, that's the end of the section there. Let's go ahead and see if there are any comments or questions about this particular section.
I mean, the intrusions are the Heelys,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's it.
No, there's the dark back figure built.
Oh yeah, Bloom.
Yeah.
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 And the invalid, of course, is going to be Molly.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we know Boylan's a liar
Yeah, she's not really an invalid.
and a rogue.
Yeah.
And a roguish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's doing two things at one time by using invalid, though. It leaves him free to flirt with the young shop girl shamelessly.
Yeah.
And it gets a young shop girl to feel sympathetic and to realize that, well, she better get this package out to that invalid to make him feel better.
And what a nice man he is to be doing
What a
this.
nice man he is. Yes. Oh my God.
Hmm.
And what a creep.
Well, we know that.
Is he also trying to steal a flower here?
You know, I had here. I'll tell you a little story. I had a daughter who we had a kind of messed up semi-paved road out here, and one of my neighbors, who is a wily sort, called the county commissioner and said that he had a neighbor with a invalid daughter who loved to play basketball, because we had a basketball hoop up in the cul-de-sac there. And it would be so nice if they would come and pave the road and the cul-de-sac. And they came and they did it. Of course, there was no invalid daughter at all in a wheelchair. He completely made all that up, but politically it worked quite well. So
there you go.
He didn't have to produce her.
Did not have to produce her. No.
So on top of his other faults, is Boylan trying to steal a flower here, or get a flower?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
Okay. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
He took the carnation from the tall stem glass. Is this for me? He said gallantly.
Yeah.
I noticed.
He's seen later by the young Dignam, and at the very last one, when the carriage is going past, he still has it in his mouth.
Yeah.
I wonder if the sales girl, though, is up to that dodge, because she seems to be recalibrating the fruit, and I wonder if she's working the cost of the flour into the price of the fruit when she's counting.
Yes.
Well, let us hope so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because he does have merry money in his trousers, probably.
Because it said she reckoned again, and I'm thinking, oh, good for you.
Bending archly.
Yeah.
So she's giving him a nicer, a better look.
Yeah.
And so she's kind of she knows what's going. She's pretty wise, I think. She knows his game, but she's going to get one on him, I think, by distracting him a little bit and changing the figures.
Yeah.
Bending archly, she reckoned again fat peaches and blushing, fat pears and blushing
Pears and
peaches.
blushing peaches.
Yeah, I think we can safely put that in the category of soft porn.
I thought I detected an object that's a through line to all these sections so far, and that's coins or lack thereof. But unfortunately, I don't think it will hold good for much longer.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like he's going to make a phone call at the shop's expense without paying for it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a real fiddler. And
No, I think he's trying to. I just think he's trying to get her phone number. He's flirting, and he says, may I talk to your telephone?"
Yeah,
Meaning,
Yeah.
what's your number?
yeah,
really,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
He asked roguishly. Yeah.
but I mean, let me just ask you a question. It seems to me at that particular time, a shop girl would not have a telephone number. Only the shops would.
Yeah, you're working.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, people had phones in their own home, or a
There
common
wouldn't have been
phone.
an, there,
Common
would, there wouldn't have
phone.
been an awful lot of phones.
Not a lot, no, but
That's it.
there would have been one in a hotel where, if that's where she's.
Oh, there would have been, yeah.
So, there's always a way to get in touch with someone.
Yeah.
And by this time, getting in touch by phone was pretty, I think, though phones weren't as common, that you could get in touch with someone by phone.
How many digits were in the number that Bloom dialed in the newspaper office? Was that 4 digits?
Probably, yeah, very few.
Indicate 9999, maybe 10,000 phone numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, my first phone number at home was 3633.
Yeah. Yeah.
My grandmother had a post office in County Limerick near Brewery, where Damon de Valera was raised, and her telephone number was Brewery 11. And I remember trying to ring from England once, and what number do you want? Brewery 11. The number, sir, not the place. The number, sir.
Yeah.
That is the number.
Where is the thing about the phone?
It's the last sentence.
Oh, may I
Page
say a word to your
205.
telephone, Missy? He asked roguishly. Oh, okay. So there's no way to actually know based on that. I wanted to point out that I think that there's some method in the madness here to go from this desperate scene at the Daedalus' house over pea soup from the nuns and suddenly to be in the shop with all these foods and drink.
Yeah.
And it's just hush, isn't it?
Well, the contrast is striking.
Mm.
As well as the colors. The other one was this grayish matte. This is in the previous one, grayish mass.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the laundry being boiled.
Yeah.
Right, heavy fume, gushed.
And the pea soup is yellow.
Yeah, the pea soup.
Yellow, thick soup. Random crumbs.
Yeah.
And then immediately we go into blonde, blazes, pink tissue, blonde, fat pears, ripe, shamefaced peaches, fruit-smelling shoplifting fruits, young, juicy, crinkled and plump, and tomatoes sniffing smells.
Yeah, I mean it's there, but I don't make much of it in terms of contrast, except that we know Boylan's got money, and we know the Douglases don't.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, would you see a contrast in terms of the quantity in the shop as opposed to the paucity of food in the home? Would you see a
Well,
contrast?
that's what shops are, stores.
No, unquestionably.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the argument is that Joyce is carefully juxtaposing these two scenes.
Yeah.
Maybe he did. I don't know. It doesn't make any impression on me in that regard. It's what you would expect. You'd expect there to be no food in a poor home, and you'd expect there to be lots of extra food and superfluous food and
For the guy,
rich people's food.
yeah, and he's got a gold watch,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In a fancy shop. So,
And he's got merry money in his trousers pocket.
Money rattling, yeah.
Jingle, jingle.
the word store, I mean, store comes from the Irish, meaning treasure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A store in Macree, treasure of my heart. So yeah, it's where you hoarded things or kept things, a lot of things. Anyway.
Yeah, she thinks he's got up regardless. In other words, she doesn't like his appearance with his tie
Right.
crooked. She's got a side, it's all inside her head as well.
Yeah.
There. Yeah, wow. That's
Yeah.
We're talking about the shop girl.
Yeah. This section he breaks out with the internal monologue. We've only had Bloom and Stephen, but he gives it to loads of characters here. I hadn't noticed that the shop girl, we get into her head as well, got up regardless.
Okay, so give me an indication where we're in her head.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom, from the end of the segment. A blonde girl glanced sideways at him. Then we go into her head, got up regardless. Tie a bit crooked. Then we come out blushing. That's her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think this is probably where we will stop reading for today.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have anything that they're reading from besides Gabler or Wordsworth that they would like me to make a note of?
Okay. I'm the same as Gabler, I think. Bodley Head, I think.
Okay.
187.
187, okay. All right. Anybody else need a reminder thing? And what I mean by what I do is I just write it in my reading copy if someone needs a reminder, and also I put it in the Facebook announcement. Okay, let me make sure. Is this working for everybody? The reading of a section and then talking before we go on to the next section?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's great.
And so
Yeah.
just
I'm delighted.
just so I'm clear on our new venture with Shakespeare, what I've understood people to say is we're going to look at Under Milkwood and then look at Shakespeare. Is that correct in that particular month?
We haven't got that far. We haven't got
Fair
that
enough.
far.
Fair enough. Okay.
And actually, it's a little unclear at this point of whether we're going to move the Shakespeare reading occasionally onto the Monday book club, or whether we're going to set up a separate time. So the information I came away with is there's pretty good interest in the group to reading Shakespeare. And there seemed to be okay agreement that we would start with Hamlet,
Yeah.
but we really don't know when we're going to do this yet. So
We were going to do My Brother's Keeper.
we were
Right.
going to do My Brother's Keeper after
Under Milkwood.
I was going to get the title right. Under Milkwood.
Under Milkwood.
I'm good either way. um, where we can either fold the occasional Shakespeare into the Monday book club, or we can set up a separate thing. Let me just take a quick tally here. This is not signing a contract, but if we did a separate time, would Friday at the same time work? Or let me put it more positive. Would Friday work for you at the same time? And if so, would you please raise your hand?
Is it this time, you mean, Duncan?
Yeah,
7, I guess.
it'd be seven in Ireland
7 Irish time.
on
Okay.
Friday.
Okay.
The other
Yeah,
possibility, okay, I
so
only see one
provisionally,
hand,
provisionally,
Provisionally.
yes.
2 hands, 3 hands.
For what? For what?
Shakespeare,
4 hands.
Friday.
4 hands.
No,
Okay,
on Fridays, Bill.
It's the time
this
slot.
is on Fridays. Okay, the other thing would be on Sundays.
Either one works for me.
Either one works for you? Okay.
So you guys decide. More and more, I mean, Joe's point earlier about the church and state bookending,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually brilliant on Joyce's part, because it's Father Conmee on the one hand and the vice-regal guy, both salute others and are recognized and saluted. And so, we see the function of the authority that they hold. And everybody else in this episode are kind of defer to them in some way. In the Daedalus girls' case, they are helped by the church. The state doesn't do much for them, but the church certainly does. I don't know what Britain does for the Irish people, but I guess it's the Royal Mail is working. We know that Father Conmee posts a letter, so the mail goes on. But it's a very interesting point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Duncan, back to the Shakespeare. Were we
Yeah.
going to also take a vote on using that Monday time slot from time to time as well? Like we voted on Friday or Sunday.
That's good. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's say we do Under Milkwood, and then we go ahead and we do My Brother's Keeper. Would we want to do a Shakespeare play after that?
Could do.
Yes, Hamlet.
Okay.
Since that way everybody that wants to can join on a Monday.
Right.
Since we're already have that time slot. So
Yeah. In some senses, that would be ideal for me.
I think.
Only because I'm happily donating quite a bit of time already to various Zooms. Okay, well, if we could try it on a Monday, and if we're willing to wait, because golly, but my Under Milkwood, I think, goes fairly quickly. I would think My Brother's Keeper is probably a couple of months, maybe 3 months.
yeah, a couple anyway. I think My Brother's Keeper is probably two meetings, maybe 3 at the very most. It should be 2 though. I think it's not very long.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it's that long. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong.
It's half a book, but it's kind of dense in places,
Yeah, I mean, I've got in this edition I have, it's 260 pages.
Yeah.
Under Milkwood?
No, not Under Milkwood, My Brother's Keeper.
Yeah, no, My Brother's Keeper. My brother Under Milkwood's probably 40, 60 at the most. I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, Under Milkwood I think would go pretty quickly.
But Keeper, there's a lot of complicated thinking in Keeper, explaining to be done in discussion. So
Yeah, maybe 4 months before we finish that. I don't know.
It might be. Well, you have to
Yeah.
bite and see. I've never done it in a group, so I know.
Mm.
Okay. One last question then. Would we want to perhaps do a Friday meeting with Shakespeare while we are reading Under Milkwood and My Brother's Keeper, and then we would shift the Shakespeare to Monday for a play's worth?
Yeah, that sounds like an idea.
Sure.
Sure.
Can you say
Yeah.
that again? What was that?
Okay, so it'd be like we'd set up a Shakespeare reading on Friday for now. And then after we do Under Milkwood and we do My Brother's Keeper, then we would shift Shakespeare to a Monday and do a play, and then maybe some other work, and then maybe a play sort of thing.
All right. So what? So we start reading what, Hamlet on a Friday? Is that?
We're reading Hamlet on a Friday. And we could start probably as soon as next Friday. Let's see. As soon as next Friday, if we wanted to.
Fine with me. Tomorrow's fine with me. But
Tomorrow's fine with you?
yeah.
All right, one more vote. Who would like to start reading Hamlet tomorrow at the usual time? Okay, I would read. Bill would read. Okay, so there would be 4 of us. Okay. Let's just go ahead and start.
Okay, tomorrow at the usual time.
Tomorrow at the usual time, we will use the same Zoom
So
information.
the Ulysses Zoom, Duncan, so is it?
Yeah, we can use a Ulysses Zoom.
The one we're on right now?
The one
Yeah.
we're on right now.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it'll work just fine because
Okay.
it's okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll see if I'll see if I can join.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, well, dust off your copies of Hamlet and I'll see
Yeah,
you
that's
tomorrow.
I'm just going to search.
Dust up your Shakespeare.
Yes.
I'm-
Fresh.
Start reading him now. Dust up your Shakespeare, and the women you will wow.
Thank you,
Only.
Mr. Kennedy. All right, I'm going to
Thank you.
click the red button and I'll see those who appear to